HOA cops slapped my daughter, 16 years old, standing right outside our house. One of them raised his hand and struck her. Her scream tore through the neighborhood. Windows opened, curtains moved, phones came out. But nobody stepped in. Nobody stopped them. They wore fake badges, called themselves HOA police. Arrogant, loud, acting like they owned the street. But that slap, that one mistake, it was the last thing they should have done, because I'm not just some homeowner paying HOA fees. I'm not just a father watching helplessly. I'm the man who used to take down cartels. The man criminals prayed they'd never meet. The one they trained for the dirtiest, darkest missions. They slapped my daughter without knowing I was FBI, and now they're about to find out exactly what that means. HOA cops slapped my daughter. That moment is carved into my memory like fire on stone. 16 years old, barely 5 feet tall, standing at the edge of our driveway, her phone in one hand, a soda can in the other. She had no idea danger was coming. The SUV came fast. Black, paint, windows tinted darker than the law allows. 3 men stepped out, boots heavy on the gravel, uniforms pressed sharp, badges hanging off their shirts, badges that looked real if you didn't know what to look for. They called themselves HOA police, enforcers of the neighborhood rules, guardians of community order. But that was all a lie. The biggest liar was the man in front, stocky, shaved head, dark sunglasses even though the sun was setting. He barked at my daughter. "You can't park here." My girl froze. "This is my driveway," she said, voice trembling but steady. The man smirked. "Not anymore." Before she could move, before she could even scream, his hand shot out and cracked against her cheek. The sound echoed. Her phone hit the concrete. The soda burst open, fizzing like blood in the silence. She stumbled, hand on her face, eyes wide. That was the moment I stepped outside. The neighbors peeked through blinds. Some raised phones, recording, whispering, like scared sheep. Not one of them came forward. Not one shouted at these men, because they believed those badges. I didn't. "Step away from her," I said, voice calm, steady. The leader turned toward me. He smiled like a wolf. "And who the hell are you?" I wanted to say it right then, wanted to tell him the truth. But no, not yet. "Her father," I said. He laughed. "Then you better teach your brat to respect authority, or next time it won't be just a slap." Her eyes found mine, terrified, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not since the Bureau, not since the missions overseas, rage. But I swallowed it down. Not here, not yet. The cops swaggered back to their SUV. The leader pointed 2 fingers at me, then at his eyes. "We'll be watching you," he said. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed. They were gone. I walked to my daughter. She was still shaking. Her cheek burned red, a handprint bright against her skin. I knelt, lifted her phone, pressed it back into her hand. "Go inside," I whispered. "Now." She hesitated. "Dad, who were they?" I forced a smile. "Nobody we can't handle." But inside, my blood was boiling, because I knew exactly what they were, and I knew exactly what I was about to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a file I hadn't opened in years. A file with a 3-letter word stamped in red, FBI. I remembered the training, the missions, the times I'd stared down drug lords, arms dealers, traitors, men who thought they were untouchable, and I remembered every time they learned the same hard truth. Nobody is untouchable. The HOA thought they could make rules, thought they could enforce them with fake cops, thought they could lay a hand on my family and walk away. They didn't know who I was, but they were about to. Tomorrow I would go hunting, and the first thing I'd uncover would shock me more than I ever imagined. HOA cops thought they had won. They slapped my daughter. They drove away laughing. But that night, they woke something inside me. They should have left buried. I wasn't just a father. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was trained to hunt men who thought they were above the law, and now these fake cops were my new target. I started with the SUV, black Chevy Suburban. Custom rims, temporary plates. It stuck in my head like a tattoo. People think they can hide behind tinted windows. They can't hide from me. I still had contacts. A friend in the sheriff's office owed me a favor. One text, and I had the plate pulled. Fake, unregistered, burn number. Typical move. Sloppy move. Next, the uniforms. At first glance, they looked real. Patches on the sleeves, badges clipped to the chest. But the stitching was cheap, the badges too shiny. And the wording, HOA Enforcement Unit. That doesn't exist. Not in this state. Not in any state. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Amateurs. They wanted power without paperwork. Fear without law, but fear only lasts until the wrong man gets angry. I needed proof. So I walked the neighborhood the next morning. Same calm smile on my face. Same polite nod to the neighbors who whispered behind curtains. But I was listening. Listening to the rumors. They say he owes the HOA thousands. I heard they're gonna seize his property. His daughter mouthed off, and that's why she got slapped. Lies. All lies planted by the HOA president, Mr. Clayton. I'd seen Clayton before. Expensive suits, slick hair, fake smile. He thought of himself as a king, and every king needs soldiers. His? Fake cops in black SUVs. By noon, I was standing outside the HOA office. A bland building at the edge of the subdivision. Glass doors, white paint already peeling. Inside, a receptionist smiled too wide, voice too sweet. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," I said. "I want to see Mr. Clayton." She frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" I leaned closer, lowered my voice. "Tell him the man whose daughter you slapped is here." Her smile vanished. 2 minutes later, Clayton walked out. Gold watch flashing, fake tan glowing, and behind him, 2 of the same fake cops from last night. My fists tightened, my pulse slowed, training kicked in. "Mr. Clayton said, pretending not to know my name. I stepped forward, inches from his face. "Your men touched my daughter." He laughed. Actually laughed. They were doing their job. Slapping. "A 16-year-old is their job?" I snapped. Clayton's grin widened. "She broke HOA rules. There are consequences." My knuckles cracked. My voice dropped. "You made a mistake." The 2 fake cops shifted, hands on their belts. One whispered, "Want us to handle him, boss?" Clayton smirked. "Not yet. He'll learn soon enough." I leaned in, my voice barely a whisper. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I walked out before my anger exploded. But not, before I saw it, the flicker of doubt in Clayton's eyes, the quick glance to his men, the twitch in his jaw. He wasn't as confident as he pretended, and that told me everything. That night, I pulled out my old lockbox. Inside, my bureau ID. Expired, but still real. My Glock. Still oiled. Still ready. And a file. Names, numbers, safe houses. Contacts I swore I'd never use again. I thought I'd buried that life. But now it was the only weapon I had. My daughter walked in, eyes red from crying. "Dad, are they coming back?" I put my hand on her shoulder. "Yes," I said softly, "but this time, we'll be ready." The next morning, their SUV was back, parked right outside my gate. 3 men inside, sunglasses, arms crossed. Waiting, a message, a threat. I smiled, because they still didn't know who I was. And tonight, I was going to show them. They thought I was just a homeowner, but by the end of this week, the HOA would find out I was their worst nightmare. The fake HOA cops thought they had me cornered. They thought sitting in their black SUV outside, my gate all day would scare me. They thought I would hide inside, keep my mouth shut, and bow down to their rules. They couldn't have been more wrong. That night, I made my decision. No more warnings. No more polite talks. They wanted to play games, but they had no idea who I really was. In the dim kitchen light, I pulled out an old lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a piece of my past, an expired FBI badge, still shining under the lamp, my Glock, perfectly oiled, and 2 small flash drives. One was labeled Bylaws, the other, OPS. My past and my skills weren't buried. They were just waiting for the right moment to wake up. I heard soft footsteps behind me. My daughter stood in the doorway, her face still swollen, her eyes filled with anger, shame, and pain. "Dad," she whispered. "I don't want to go to school. Tomorrow. Everyone saw the videos." Videos. That's what the neighbors did. Not one of them stepped in to help when she was slapped. But they had no problem pulling out their phones and recording. That was their version of bravery. I walked over and rested my hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong," I said quietly. She looked down, her voice trembling. "They had uniforms. Who would think they were fake?" I looked her straight in the eyes and forced a calm smile. "I would think that. And soon, they will too. Because when they touched you, they woke up the wrong man." Her lips parted. "Dad, who are you really?" I smiled, but my eyes were cold. "I'm your father, and for some people, I'm their worst nightmare." The next morning, I began my investigation. Clayton, the HOA president, was nothing more than a puppet master pulling cheap plastic strings. Fake cops, fake plates, fake authority. He'd built an entire empire of lies, but his foundation was weak, and I was about to rip it apart. I dug into the HOA's original bylaws, the ones filed when this subdivision was first built. Then I compared them to the framed, updated version hanging in their office. Side by side, the truth glared back at me. Clause 14A originally stated, "No private security personnel may represent the HOA as law enforcement." In the framed version, cut out cleanly as if it never existed. Clause 22C originally limited HOA authority to common areas. Driveways and deeded land were exempt. In the new version, it was changed to, "Subject to emergency enforcement." What kind of emergency justified slapping a 16-year-old girl? Clause 7F said fines couldn't exceed damages. In the new version, it read, "At the board's discretion." Translation? Whatever Clayton wanted. I could see the entire picture forming in my head. Fake cops for intimidation, edited bylaws as cover, huge fines as extortion, and their targets were always the weakest. Single moms, retirees, new families. But this time, they had chosen the wrong man. By mid-morning, I called an old friend in the sheriff's office. "Temporary tags, black Suburban, run it for me." Laughed. "You retired or are you back on duty?" "Just cleaning up the neighborhood," I said. The results came quick. Plates dirty, VIN shaved, insurance spoofed. A classic impersonator setup. Next, I reached out to an old bureau contact, Sarah. She worked intel, sharp as a blade. I texted, "Got a local HOA running private muscle. Possible Ryco light. Need a parallel look." Her reply came seconds later. "Send me a list." Then, "Be careful." The list was easy. Clayton, the president. Follow the money. The 2 fake cops, the bald leader and the thin one with a beard. Find their priors. Vendor contracts, towing, landscaping, enforcement services. Bank. Accounts. HOA dues funneled into shell companies. It was all lining up. That afternoon, I took a quiet walk down the street. Their black SUV was still sitting at my gate. The bald one smirked when he saw me. "Nice morning," he said. I smirked back. "The best one you'll have for a while." I clipped my chest camera on and pulled out a small drone. It lifted silently into the air, circling high. The HOA office, the clubhouse, parking lots, patterns of movement. Then I spotted it. Behind the clubhouse, next to a dumpster, a gray storage bin. Too clean, too secure. Zooming in, I saw a faint logo. Aegis Municipal Services. I ran the name. Nothing in local registry, but a private database pinged an out-of-state shell company. Directors, redacted. 2 names connected. Lyle Vance, former private contractor with an assault charge. Marco Hale, busted years ago for impersonating a federal officer. So that was it. Ex-contractors, fake cops, a dirty little army on Clayton's payroll. I needed hard evidence. That night I geared up, lockpicks, pry bar, gloves, a bottle of UV developer. The alley behind the clubhouse was pitch black. Perfect. The padlock on the gray bin was cheap. 2 minutes later, it clicked open. Inside, uniform patches, blank badges, HOA enforcement decals, freshly made. At the bottom, a folder labeled Roster and SOP, their standard operating procedure. I snapped photos, sprayed UV developer on the pages. Fingerprints glowed. I grinned. Hello, Baldy. But that wasn't all. Taped underneath the bin was a burner phone. I powered it on. The last text message glowed on the screen. Invoice, Clayton 18K, Friday. $18,000. Clayton was paying them directly. It wasn't just intimidation. It was extortion. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office during public hours. The receptionist plastered on her fake smile. Mr. Clayton is busy. Then call the board, I said. Minutes later, I was standing in their conference room, Clayton at the head of the table. The board members lined up, and behind them, the 2 fake cops standing like shadows. I dropped a folder on the table. Inside, the original bylaws and the edited version, highlighted, side by side. Fraud, I said. Then I slid another page across the table. Invoices, 18 grand. Every month. Signed by you. The board went silent. One member flinched. Another looked down at the table. Clayton chuckled nervously. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my last photo. Badges, patches, SOPs, the burner phone screen. The color drained from his face. The fake cops shifted, uneasy. I leaned back in my chair. I don't need money. I don't need control. I just want one thing. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my daughter. And shut this clown show down. Clayton leaned forward, his smile twitching. Or what? I stared into his eyes. Or, I flipped the switch. He forced a laugh. What switch? The one that turns this into federal impersonation, document tampering, racketeering. Ever heard of RICO? The room erupted in whispers. Clayton slammed the table. Meeting over. I stood, walked to the door, then paused. I turned back, looked straight into the camera clipped to my chest and said, Good. Now the world will see. Tonight. Clayton's face went pale. Camera? He shouted. His fake cops lunged forward, but I was already out the door. That night, I trimmed the footage, 90 seconds long, titled it, Meet My HOA Cops. But I didn't upload it. Not yet. Insurance first. 1 copy in the cloud. 1 encrypted drive. 1 sent straight to Sarah. Her reply was instant. State AG just pinged. They want your package. Also, your baldy Sarge Lyle Vance. His record is ugly. A second message followed. Be careful. Someone just pulled your property file. My stomach tightened. I checked the county records portal. Today, there was a new access log. Clerk terminal. HOA council. Notes. Easement review. Right-of-way claim. They weren't just after fear or fines anymore. They wanted my land. They wanted everything under my feet. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at their SUV still idling in the dark. Baldy lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the night sky. I sent one quiet text to my sheriff friend. Hold fire. I need a 10-minute window. He replied with 2 words. You got it. I pulled a small RF jammer from my pocket and flipped it on. A bubble of silence surrounded the SUV. Their dash cams went blind. Their radios went dead. Their phones cut out. I walked along the fence line, steady, calm, every breath measured. My knuckles cracked, my heartbeat slowed. Then I slid the rear door open and stepped inside. Baldy whipped around. "What the—" My Glock pressed against his ribs. "Hands." The bearded one froze, sweat running down his face. "Easy, man, we're just—" "Fake cops," I snapped. "Aegis, Vance, Hale, impersonation, racketeering, your list is long." Baldy tried to laugh. "You can't prove—" "I already opened your bin," I growled, "and I have your phone." The grin died on his face. "Clayton's paying us," he whispered. "That's it. He wants your deed. Says your driveway sits on HOA land. We just scare people. No big deal." "No big deal." My voice cut through the night like a blade. "You slapped my daughter." Silence. Only the hum of the engine. Only their heavy breathing. "Tomorrow," I said coldly, "you'll walk into that clubhouse in uniform, and in front of everyone you'll admit you're not law enforcement, just private security, no authority to touch anyone." Baldy's jaw clenched. "And if we don't?" "Then the real cops take you in on old warrants, and you don't walk out." He looked at the bearded one, then slowly nodded. "Fine." I leaned out of the SUV, pausing just long enough to deliver the message. "Tell Clayton, tomorrow night, his kingdom falls." The next evening, a special meeting was announced at the clubhouse. The entire neighborhood showed up, phones ready to record. State investigators were waiting quietly in the background. But one thing was missing. Clayton. He had vanished. And in his name, a forged deed transfer for my property had already been filed. Clayton was gone. Gone like a ghost. The man who ran this little kingdom disappeared the moment the heat got real. One minute he was slamming his fist on the boardroom table. The next, his office was empty, his phone straight to voicemail, and his chair cold. People whisper, phones light up. But Clayton vanished. That should have relieved me. It did not. It worried me. A missing king means a coup. Or worse, a setup. I'd learned in the bureau that when the boss runs, the problem gets deeper. So I doubled down. The forged deed didn't faze me. Not yet. Paper can be changed. Paper can be forged. What worried me was the speed. How quickly had they moved? Who in the county clerk's office had helped? Or had someone used a compromised account? I sat at my kitchen table and watched the documents again. Forged signatures. A transfer stamp dated the same day Clayton disappeared. Convenient. Too convenient. I needed witnesses. I needed public pressure. I needed the kind of attention that made small men run. So I started with the one thing Clayton feared: exposure. I called Sarah and told her everything. She was blunt. "State AG is on it," she said. "But legal takes time. You need a spectacle. Something the neighbors will see and talk about." I smiled. That word, spectacle, was exactly what I wanted. I would give them a show. A show with no violence, just truth. And a little theatrics. The next morning I parked my truck right in front of the clubhouse. Big, dumb, obvious. Cameras on the dash, a tripod with a camera. My chest cam all rolling. I left a note on Clayton's brick mailbox. "Public meeting, 6 p.m., bring receipts." Then I walked the neighborhood. I knocked on doors. I told people, "Come see the truth." Most were hesitant. Fear sticks. But curiosity is stronger. By noon, enough people had promised to come to make a crowd. By 5, the parking lot was full. Phones out. Gossip loud. The fake cops shuffled. Outside, suddenly less confident without Clayton's bold-faced grin. They wore their uniforms like costumes now. Awkward. Wrong. One or two neighbors whispered that they'd seen the men around town taking pictures of properties. Another said his elderly aunt had paid a fine and been given no receipt. I took the stage, a folding chair, a loud voice, a camera rolling, and I started to read. Not speeches, facts, documents, names, dates, receipts, invoices. I showed the Aegis burner phone text. I played a 30-second clip from the drone, and, overhead of the gray bin, I held up the photos of the fake badges. People saw it. Real faces. Real proof. Murmurs turned into gasps, and then Clayton's lawyer arrived. Finally, a man in a suit that cost more than my truck. He planted himself in front of Clayton's empty chair and tried to calm the crowd. "These allegations are unverified," he said. "We will pursue legal action for defamation." He sounded small in that concrete parking lot. I wanted to laugh. But then a car window rolled down at the edge of the crowd. A man in a plain shirt leaned out and said, "Are you the one who filmed them?" He had the look of someone who had been pushed too many times. A woman behind him shouted her story, bank statements showing HOA dues taken, money wired to a shell company with a P.O. box address. Someone else held up a printed copy of the forged deed. The crowd turned. Momentum shifted. Phones were streaming now. Clips were already online. People were sharing. The state AG team watched from the shadows, quiet and precise. That was the moment I let a small smile spread across my face. The spectacle was working. The pressure was mounting. But the real game was still in motion. Public outrage moves the needle. So does law. But I wanted a different kind of leverage. I wanted the county clerk's fingerprints on that forged deed. I wanted to show who touched the file. I wanted a trail that led straight to whoever had opened the clerk terminal. That day, that night, I drove to the county building. Doors locked, lights dimmed, security cameras everywhere. I walked the perimeter until I found the service entrance used by staff. There's always a service door. There's always a blind spot. I crawled under a shrub, let the night swallow me, and watched the staff exit one by one. I timed their patterns. I learned their routines. Habits reveal themselves when someone watches long enough. At 1:13 a.m., the cleaning crew's radio chirped. The clerk's car rolled into the garage. He worked late. Lucky me. He left his terminal logged in on the main screen. I could see the glow. The building was empty, silent, perfect. I felt my old training click in. Quick, clean, no drama. I slipped in through the service door like a shadow. The corridors were cool and smelled faintly of disinfectant. I moved fast. No alarms tripped, no lights flared. I reached the clerk's workstation. The screen was awake. The hour was stamped in the corner. I typed a fake admin query and pulled the access logs for the day Clayton's forged deed was filed. I scanned. Time, terminal, IP address, username. It was not a simple clerk login. It was routed through a third-party law firm's proxy. The proxy traced back to an unsuspecting firm downtown, one that handled HOA council work. Convenient again. I took screenshots, time-stamped, irrefutable. I copied the raw log file to a portable drive. I set a small breadcrumb, a subtle change in the cursor color so I could tell if someone else came back to that terminal. Then I left. No violence, no tail. Clean. Back at home, I arranged everything. The drone footage, the documents, the clerk's access log screenshots, the burned phone text. I sent the packet to Sarah and the state AG. I also uploaded a short-timed teaser to a few select local outlets, just enough to get their attention, not enough to blow the investigation. I wanted legal pressure and public heat in the same kettle. Then, I waited. The next morning, the county clerk called me personally, voice shaky. "Someone accessed my terminal last night," he said. "There's a trace. I don't know how." He was lying. He did know. He was trying to buy time. Still, it was evidence. A crack. By noon, the fake cops were visibly nervous. They moved like men who knew the law could be breathing down their necks. The bald leader stayed home. The bearded one kept his head low. Clayton's lawyer kept talking about lawsuits, but every time he opened his mouth, someone in the crowd pulled out a phone and showed another receipt, another text, another picture. The board started to argue among themselves. Money does funny things to loyalty. But the forged deed was still a threat. Whoever filed that transfer had done it through a proxy linked to Clayton's counsel. That was a problem. It was also a chance. That afternoon, Sarah called me with a new development. "We pulled the proxy," she said. It routes through a server farm abroad and then bounces back. But the payment trail goes through a little-known escrow in the city. The account's registered. To a shell. We can subpoena it, but we need probable cause. She paused. We need one thing. Victim statements. You, officially. You need to file a complaint. Public. Under oath. That will flip the switch. I leaned against the porch railing, feeling the weight of it. Going public under oath is a knife. It ties you. It exposes you to cross-examination. But it also forces courts and agencies to move. It sounded like the switch I'd promised Clayton I'd flip. I signed the complaint that evening. Handshaking? Maybe a little. Purposeful? Absolutely. I filed under my given name. I detailed the slap. I detailed the fake enforcement. I attached the drone footage and the bin photos and the burner phone screenshot. I included the clerk's logs. I swore it all on record. Within hours, the state AG filed a temporary restraining order on any property transfers associated with the HOA. The forged deed was frozen. My property was safe, for now. But freezing a deed is not the same as finding the man who forged it, whoever that was, and whoever he answered to. That night, as I watched the neighborhood chatter and the headlines pop up online, I felt the net tighten. The public was watching. The AG was watching. Clayton, wherever he was hiding. The fake cops were rattled. The board was fracturing. But I also felt a new danger. Someone had already accessed my property file. Someone had pulled a forged transfer under Clayton's name. That meant they had resources, access, people on the inside, men who could make papers say anything, and men like that don't usually make mistakes. They plan. Deep. At 2 a.m. main 1 and on said my size. Phone buzzed. Unknown number. No caller ID. A single text. You're stirring wasps. Careful who you wake. I stared at the message. Then I smiled. This was getting personal. They sent the text at 2 a.m. You're stirring wasps. Careful who you wake. Short, simple, menacing. Friendly advice from an anonymous coward. I read it twice. Then I folded the phone and put it face down. Threats were noise. Evidence was the trumpet. I had both. The state AG had frozen the forged deed. The public was talking. Clayton was hiding. The fake cops were jittery. The board was fracturing. But none of that stopped them from trying to scare me. That only proved one thing. They were scared of me. Morning came slow. My daughter was quieter now. She watched the news like everyone else. She kept glancing at the door like a soldier waiting for permission to breathe. I made her breakfast. Tried to keep the kitchen normal. But normal had been taken from us that night the SUV rolled up. You can't put normal back with a smile. Sarah called first. We've got a target, she said. No hello, no small talk, just business. Lyle Vance is linked to 3 incidents in the county. Marco Hale popped up on a federal impersonation watch list last year. We pushed for an alert. The state AG wants them interviewed. We think they ran cleanup ops for Clayton. She paused. We can move now, but we need to be smart. They'll run, or they'll fight. Then don't let them run, I said. She laughed softly. You always did like the dramatic option. She was right. I did. The Bureau trains you that way. You plan for the straight line, then build contingencies for the curve. For every loose end, you imagine the knot. For every knot, you picture the cut. That skill matters when a petty HOA thinks it can buy muscle and terrorize a neighborhood. By noon, the state team had issued subpoenas and quietly moved in with local law enforcement. It was a clean operation on paper. Interviews, paperwork, warrants. The kind of quiet military sweep that makes men with skeletons in closets sweat an inch at a time. I stayed on the perimeter. Didn't step into the flash and formalities. I let the law do its part. My job was different. I had to keep Clayton from disappearing for good. He had answers. More than that, he held the paper trail. I needed him alive. Hours later, an armored car pulled into a motel 3 towns over. A woman from the AG team called me. We have movement. Clayton checked in under an alias. He's paranoid, he's not sleeping, stay ready. I grabbed my jacket, told my daughter to stay home, lock the door, call only if she heard anything. She nodded. There was a bravado in that nod, a kind of faith I'd earned, and a responsibility I could never give back. The motel was the kind of place that smelled faintly of bleach and regret. Clayton sat in the lobby like a man who had swallowed too much confidence. I watched him from a distance as AG agents made their approach. He flinched when they walked in. That was good. Men who flinch have nowhere to hide. They escorted him outside, in handcuffs. He tried to speak to the cameras. He tried to spin a line about political attacks. His voice sounded small on the curb. The news vans circled like vultures. His lawyer barked legalese, but underneath it all, his calm was gone. He looked at me once. That stare tried to find an angle, a weakness. It landed on my daughter, who was being kept safe in the car. He saw her. For a blink, something raw and ugly showed on his face. Fear, regret, or maybe calculation. Hard to tell. In the interrogation room, Clayton's bravado evaporated like smoke. He folded quicker than I expected. Money had been the motive, he claimed. Just business. He didn't name names at first. That was his nature, protecting whatever sick network he'd built. But the pressure mounted. Evidence is a cruel friend to liars. There are files, invoices, burner phones, and people who talk when their freedom is on the line. Marco Hale and Lyle Vance were both brought in separately. Hale stayed stubborn at first. Vance, on the other hand, started to crack when presented with photos of the gray bin and the text message about 18 grand. Clayton promised us protection, he muttered. And money. He said he'd handle the paperwork. I didn't know about the deed. His voice trailed off like a man losing his map. You extorted old ladies, one of the AG attorneys said. You impersonated officers. You threatened people and took their money. The words landed like a hammer. Vance's hands shook. I sat in a corner outside the interview room and watched. The man who had called himself our community's protector was unmasked as a small-time racketeer with a fake crown. But the story was more layered than that. Every time a liar is exposed, the shock reveals deeper lies underneath. Clayton started naming a few more players. A property lawyer who'd done extra work on the side. A county clerk who owed favors. The names were enough to light up a few files, but not the whole web. My gut told me there was one more. A hedge. Someone with teeth in the clerk's office. Someone who could make a forged transfer look legitimate. The kind of person who doesn't get flashy with money, but moves it like an invisible hand. That night, after Clayton was booked, a man showed up at my front gate. He didn't knock. He left an envelope, no signature, just a note. You pushed too hard, stop. Inside was a photograph. My daughter at school laughing in a group shot. Circles around her face. Someone had been watching. Anger didn't help, but clarity did. Whoever had pulled my property file had enough access to track everyday details. That meant they had inside access or a very skilled hacker. Either way, their reach was long. The envelope proved it. I brought the photo to Sarah. She leaned forward and studied the edges. This was taken from a PTA page but downloaded and printed, she said. Not hard, but someone left a deliberate mark. This is intimidation. They want you to see your daughter in public and feel exposed. She tapped the picture. That's intimidation. It's also a show of control. They want you to play scared. I felt the old reflex. Protect. Isolate. Counter. But I also felt the need to call the neighborhood in. Fear spreads when it's solitary. Courage grows when it's shared. I called a small meeting at my porch. Neighbors came. The ones who'd peered through curtains started to stand by their doors. Some hands shook as they recounted fines and threats. An elderly woman said she'd paid a series of compliance fees and never gotten a receipt. A young dad showed a text where a number threatened to list his property for violations if he didn't pay. The stories piled up like kindling. We'll stand together, I told them. We file complaints together. We record everything. We don't let them isolate a target. There were nods, a few brave claps. It was small, but it mattered. It shifted the neighborhood from whisper to chorus. Meanwhile, the legal battle continued. The state AG hit Clayton and his ring with an emergency injunction and an array of charges. The forged deed remained frozen. A temporary restraining order kept any transfers from moving, but the fire wasn't out. Blocking a forged transaction is paperwork. Catching the hand that placed it is work. At dawn the next day, my daughter woke me before the alarm. She held a crumpled flyer. "They posted these," she said, "on the streetlights. They say I caused trouble." Someone had pasted a mocked-up flyer with my face and slanderous claims. The petty cruelty stung. But it did something else. It showed desperation. When liars get cornered, they smear. It's reflex. I contacted the AG team. They moved to subpoena more records. They also sent a detective to ride with my daughter to school. The small comforts of that gesture mattered. Patrols started appearing more often. There was safety and presence, but the deeper threat remained. Whoever had fudged the deed had access to records. Someone in the clerk system or within the council's proxy had the keys. That was the wormhole. You cut the worm, you sever the root. Sarah had another lead. "There's an IP bounce pattern that keeps resolving to a municipal contractor account," she said. "It's sloppy, but it's consistent. We can trace transactions, that will give us a name, but we need one of them to flip on document handling. Someone on the inside. We can offer immunity in exchange for cooperation." It was a risk. Immunity for the willing is a useful tool. The question was, who would take it? Who was small enough to be scared and big enough to know Clayton's moves? We set the trap. An email bait with an attached innocuous-looking invoice went out from a controlled account. The prosecutor's team watched the server. The phone line waited. If someone tried to authenticate it from the internal council account, the trace would light up like a Christmas tree. I didn't sleep that night. The old reflexes kept me company. I thought of my daughter's swollen cheek. I thought of Clayton's thin smile in the lobby. I pictured the man who'd pulled the record, not flashy, but dangerous, and I promised myself I'd find him. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed, an automated ping from the legal server. Someone accessed the bait, then another ping, and then a name I'd been circling for days. A mid-level council associate with a gambling problem. Small debts, big temptation, access. The net tightened. The trap had found a leg. But corners of the web are never clean. As one hand goes down, others twitch. A new message slid into my inbox. It was simple. Back off, or we cut deeper. The line was cold. The handwriting was thoughtless. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Sarah. With a one-word note, "Bring it." The game was getting messy, personal, dangerous, and I was ready.